Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. My name is Maria Rahani. I am the lead for the public conversation here at the Generation Equality Forum, and I'm thrilled to be opening up today's event for World Environment Day. Before we get started, we have interpretation available, so please make sure if you're in the Zoom to select the appropriate language at the bottom of your screen. That way, throughout today's conversation, you can hear all of us and are able to follow along. So before we jump into the conversation that everyone is here for, I just wanted to give a quick overview of Generation Equality Forum. If you've never joined us before, what is it and what are we aiming to achieve? So the Generation Equality Forum is a set of global gatherings co-hosted by Mexico, France, and UN Women. And it's really taking stock of the 25 years since the Beijing Conference of 1995, thinking about all the gains we've made in that time, but also challenging ourselves to think about what we want to see happen in the next 5 years to really advance gender equality globally. One of the things that we're really excited about in these forums is that they're multi-stakeholder, meaning that we're seeing civil society, corporations, member states, funders, all at the table together. And we consider the public conversation platform the public seat at that table. So it's not just that you're logging on and you're learning about these issues, but that you're actually giving input that really impacts the type of output that we give globally. So I hope you join us there. At the same time, we have the Paris Forum coming up at the end of the month. You can find out more information about that on the public conversation platform, also on the Generation Equality Forum. You can still register. So there are multiple ways for you to get involved. So one thing I want to mention is that we do not have a chat in the Zoom today. All of the conversation will be happening on the public conversation platform, so please make sure to log on and hear what other folks are saying as we dive into this conversation. Okay, so that's it from me. I know that folks came to talk about climate justice, and we're about to do just that. We are so thrilled to have a dynamic group of women with us today to talk about climate justice, youth activism, and gender equality. They've really been leading this conversation in their communities, and we think that this conversation today is going to be such a great glimpse of all of the work that they're doing. So I'm going to hand it over to one of our panelists and our moderator, Jonita, who will be introducing herself and the panelists before diving into the conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome again.
Thank you so much, Maria, for that nice introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are joining in from in this global village. My name is Jonita Amy from Uganda, one of the co-leaders of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice, but also I'm the co-founder of Girls for Climate, where we are putting young women and girls at the forefront of climate action because of their vulnerability to climate change impacts here in Uganda. I'm super honored to be having this discussion with you all. We know that each year the World Environment Day reminds us of the need to protect and save the environment for both the present and especially the future generation. The actions and decisions we take now will very much determine the future of our planet. And over the years, it has become vivid that women and men experience crisis differently, mainly due to the social structures that have been built over time in our patriarchal society. For example, here in Uganda and Africa at large, not also forgetting other continents, women carry the burden of most of the crisis because they are conditioned to be primary food gatherers, caregivers, harvesters of water, energy use, and other needs for the well-being of their families. And yet, they have been left out in key decision-making processes. It is on this note that we need feminist action for climate justice to recognize and front the fact that the fight for environmental sustainability is not separate from the fight for social justice. Climate justice centralizes the needs of people who are the most marginalized, the most impoverished, rural indigenous women, for example, who live directly on land and take care of families and are more impacted by natural disasters. To give you a snippet of what the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition is aiming at achieving in the next 5 years, we intend to increase political advocacy and financial support for the real solutions already being proposed and enacted by women and girls at the front lines, and also supporting the just transition to a green economy that is led by women and girls. We also recognize that women and girls need equal access to technologies and knowledge, equal access and control over natural resources for management and protection, advocate for equal and meaningful participation of women and girls in all decision-making processes at all levels. And still, we very much recognize and we are aligning our commitments to the need to produce sex disaggregated data to achieve climate policies that enable women and girls to fully benefit from them, while making sure that such policies do not exacerbate existing inequalities. And across the globe, we have seen many young women already creating and leading solutions at all levels. We have seen them putting their unique knowledge and skills to respond to climate change more effectively and sustainably into use. And today being the World Environment Day with the theme of ecosystem restoration to highlight the environmental situation, we'd like to appreciate all youths that are bringing a new wave of bold and effective solutions and calling on the world to this emergency. We really see you, we hear you, and we see you. Today we are virtually gathering here for a discussion to highlight some out of the many young women and girls leading the fight for climate justice. We'll identify issues affecting women and girls and opportunities for girls to get involved in the fight for climate justice. We need collective action to fight the crisis. At this point, I would therefore like to introduce our amazing panelists, Amy and Latisha. Amy is from the USA, and Amy, the floor is yours to introduce yourself.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Keichis, and I would like to say it is an honor to be here in this space, and I'm looking forward to learning from today's speakers, Juanita and Leticia. I'm originally from Jackson Heights, Queens, New York, and currently residing in Washington, D.C. to finish my master's degree. I wanted to recognize that I'm on Piscataway land, as it is important to note when speaking about land reparations, climate, food, and environmental justice. I am the founder of Veggie Mijas, a plant-based collective centering women, gender nonconforming, femmes, queer and trans people of color, and food and environmental justice work. And through Instagram and the physical world, I share knowledge through radical storytelling and create workshops throughout the community. I received my bachelor's degree in women's and gender studies and sociology from Syracuse University, and I'm currently pursuing my master's at American University, and I'm studying ethics, peace, and human rights with a concentration in global environmental justice. Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Latisha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leticia Amy. I'm based in Lebanon. I am here as part of Lebanon Reforestation Initiative, which is a Lebanese NGO that works on various ecosystem restoration projects, mostly in the forestry sector. I work mostly on urban forestry and in the climate change component, and I am extremely honored to be here with such inspiring and powerful individuals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy and Latisha, for that introduction and the amazing work you're doing. Again, for participants, just keep sending in your comments and questions in the discussion forum. So we'll dive into the discussion already, and I'll turn to you, Amy. We have seen many young people leading the fight for climate justice across the globe, but this is always influenced or triggered by something. And to you, Amy, what experiences led you to climate justice work?
Thank you, Juanita, for that question. I didn't always know I wanted to do climate, food, and environmental justice work because I thought my personal experiences with food appetites and sea health disparities in my own community was an issue that was considered a norm anywhere, not just in Jackson Heights. Being first generation and coming from Colombian and Peruvian parents, I grew up never knowing what a farmer's market was, but going to a grocery run that was not at a walkable distance. I also grew up going to bodegas, also known as small grocery stores that do not carry food, healthy options. And my friends and I would just snack and wait for the bus. Different schools for all grades all had bodegas in the corner because it is not a coincidence that there is a bodega and fast food place in every corner of schools and communities of color. It is also not a coincidence that Queens has only one supermarket for every five fast food restaurants, and 6 corner stores. And as a kid, of course, I questioned why I get to go to a park that cops come in every 5 minutes to check up on us, or why kids in the Bronx get a polluted river versus white neighborhoods that have nice parks and get to kayak on their waters. It wasn't until I was the first one to go to college, go out of my neighborhood, and saw this oppressive system that is rooted in climate and environmental racism was a national and international problem. As I began to learn more about intersectional feminist studies, a colleague advised me, Amy, since you're a feminist, you should be vegan. Again, another concept I had no idea about. She gave me a book titled Sister Vegan, Black Female Vegans Speak on Food, Identity, Health, and Society by Dr. Abrees Harper. And everything all of a sudden clicked for me. And I had a million thoughts at once. I started thinking about my experiences as a kid in Queens and even as a college student at Syracuse, a school that separates students by the community and students by a bridge, and making it very hard to access any health food options, period. Throughout my life, I remember feeling shame that I know many people of color with similar experiences feel towards myself, not being able to feed myself healthy food, and overall having a lack of knowledge and feeling like I'm not worthy of these healthy foods. When I began my plant-based journey, my parents did not know what to do with me, and it sparked a conversation, whether that was about my childhood, the various foods we can enter in our lives, how climate affects our food, and so forth. Thank God for YouTube, because after teaching my mom what an eggplant was and how to cook one, she came up with many plant-based recipes on her own. My parents are now mostly plant-based due to health issues, because I would say they're more aware now of food choices than we ever were in our early years. And when I left Syracuse, I missed having vegan friends of color, as simple as that. I created an Instagram page in order to start collecting ancestral recipes from various backgrounds and people. And while that was very successful, people wanted more. I wanted more. I started a spreadsheet to start collecting everyone's information, such as gender, sexuality, city. And what I originally planned for was a database spreadsheet where folks can access it and hang out with each other. Again, I thought only 5 people were going to join. It turned into having a list more than 60 people in New York City tab, and everyone in New York City wanted to have our first event, which ended up being a room of 35 strangers that really wanted a radical space to speak about these issues that were happening in their communities and genuinely wanting to get to know one another. Once we posted the photo New York City event on our Instagram page, I got emails from Oakland, LA, Chicago, and now Veggie Mijas has 12 chapters, including India, filled with organizers doing food, environmental, and climate justice work in their own communities.
Wow, what started as something for one person is just now getting into like a movement. And that's really, really amazing. I would ask everyone to kind of share with us the experiences that led them to climate justice work. You can just type that in the discussion forum and we can also hear from you as well. And I'll now dive into the theme for the day, ecosystem restoration, calling for our urgent action to revive our damaged ecosystem. Now, reports show that over 4.7 million hectares of forest, an area larger than Denmark, are lost every year. That's like 1 football pitch every 3 seconds. Over half of the world's wetlands have disappeared in the last century. This is depriving the world of carbon sinks like forests, and we are at the verge of a very bad crisis. We need urgent solutions. And at this point, when I talk about solutions, I'd like to invite Latisha to speak a bit more about ecosystem restoration and the amazing work you're doing. Latisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juanita. So we have several components at LRI, Lebanon Reforestation Initiative, that work on various ecosystem restoration programs, mostly in the forestry sector. And they address various challenges that we faced here in Lebanon, but that I'm sure many other countries can relate to, such as forest fires, deforestation, land degradation, impacts of climate change, and so on. I will briefly mention a few, but I encourage you to check our website or social media pages for a more detailed overview of our projects. Since 2011, the Lebanon Reforestation Initiative has planted over 1 million native tree and shrub seedlings in degraded lands all across Lebanon. We have done so using a very customized, tailored reforestation technique that specifically selects species based on site suitability, site conditions, and also, of course, and most importantly, community needs. That is other than the tailored irrigation and fencing systems that we also install. We work mostly in rural areas, but more recently we are delving into the urban context as well. We also have a forest management program at LRI that works on creating management plans that take into consideration the needs and uses of the forests by local communities and how this relationship can be managed sustainably. This program also includes pest management, selective thinning and pruning, and the development of biofuels through pruning residues to support local needs in a sustainable way from forest resources. Under our climate change program, we have implemented projects in which we reforested and terraced steep slopes to protect bare lands from soil loss, while also planting herbs that are economically beneficial for the local community along the terraces. We also have a very active fire prevention component that works tirelessly to bridge the gap between communities and fire prevention and to change the behavior of local communities towards the protection of their forests. It's called the Firewise approach. This is done through actively engaging the community in the pruning and thinning of the understory of forest areas to reduce forest fuels, creating fire breaks, equipping municipalities with fire prevention tools, training locals in firefighting techniques, and so on. We also have an agroforestry component that integrates forest trees into farming systems as a way of creating more productive ecosystems. And considering that the agricultural sector in Lebanon is projected to be most impacted, or one of the most impacted sectors according to climate projections, applying agroforestry systems also aims to create resilience in agricultural lands through nature-based solutions while providing economic incentives for land and forest conservation. And of course, cross-cutting in all these projects is an integral community engagement program that makes sure to include community members in the decision-making and design and the implementation of the project and the awareness raising within the community, in addition to a gender strategy that is focused on women's specific interests, needs, capacities, and vulnerabilities within this sector, and making sure that they are being recognized and catered to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Latisha. Just doing so much amazing work. I like the component of attaching an economic component to ecosystem restoration. I think oftentimes this is something that can pull people to a cause because they know at the end of the day, they're also getting some income out of something. So I really, really like that. And just move on. In the beginning, we got to know what the Feminist Action for Climate Justice is about and what the aims are for the coming years, one of which is focusing on enabling women and girls to lead a just transition to an inclusive, circular, regenerative green economy. Can you speak about how women and girls are doing this work and ensuring that our economy centralizes climate justice? We can hear from maybe Latisha first.
Sure. So at LRI, we have a gender component that is led by a wonderful and very smart woman called Mireille Jazi. And through this component, a gender mainstreaming strategy that aims to empower women and girls in the forestry sector was designed. Through it also, as part of it, we work to design specific activities that encourage female engagement in conventional and non-conventional rules, specifically in the forestry sector. And so I think that it's through these types of activities that actually fit under the whole circular, inclusive, regenerative green economy that we economically empower these women that come from very traditional rural areas that, you know, these are not typical activities that they usually would be engaged in, and these are not economic opportunities that typically would be open for them. We think that through these economically empowering activities, we're actually also increasing their resilience. And these activities include beekeeping. So we've had groups of women engaged in learning beekeeping practices and learning through all of the stages of the process. We've had groups of women share and teach us, but also, learn from trainers that we would get that are specialized in sustainable harvesting of herbs that they would go on to use in cooking, for cosmetic use, to create cosmetic products, maybe soap making, medicinal use. So really anything that it's an economic opportunity that maybe even allows them to create jobs for them or to take some sort of entrepreneurship position. And we even have trainings in firefighting. Currently, we are conducting trainings in firefighting that includes workshops on fire prevention, trauma care, and so on. And so through these activities, we hope that women from disadvantaged communities and from low-income households and maybe from vulnerable areas in Lebanon can increase their skills, and also that can create additional sources of income for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Latisha. Amy, what's that you are doing, or what solutions you think work?
Yeah, so just echoing also what Leticia said, I think that green jobs are super important, and also funding these organizations, these green organizations that are doing the work, right? And trusting women of color, trusting queer folks of color that have the knowledge and expertise for a green economy. And Veggie Mijas is one of those projects that center women and queer folks of color voices within various communities. And oftentimes there are barriers that we face when it comes to finances because capital funders approach to justice issues following a traditional understanding of what counts as data to a social justice project. How they access information can secure funding is based on hard science that is sometimes unfriendly to the ways of knowing and organizing in collaborative projects. However, this doesn't mean that we're not open to this. And in fact, we have an incredible data team and a finance team with amazing women that are going to work on certain database projects. But we need to talk about the funding process, especially when it comes to women and queer folks of color that have never had access to money or a large amount of money or financial stability at all. And we welcome any grant training or economic training or any collaboration idea in which we need to have an important conversation on how funding needs to be tailored to our community needs and our social justice framework. I believe that education and training priorities are necessary, teaching women about data in order to collect environmental gender statistics in our own communities, and trust that we are the experts of the movement based on personal lived experiences. And lastly, we cannot talk about economy centralizing around climate justice without talking about climate reparations, such as turning empty lots of communal parks or affordable housing instead of lots for real estate developers in order to eliminate pollution. And in my case, the New York City government needs to acknowledge that the environmental damages that it has done to our boroughs, speaking for Queens here, and seeking funding priorities for our communities. And Veggie Mijas has done an outstanding job to always talk about the political work and the grassroots work that is needed in various communities throughout the cities.
Thank you so much for that submission, Amy. I like the fact that you also touched on affordable housing and really sustainable communities. Most of the times you actually leave this out, and yet marginalized groups are in these communities. So I think it's very, very essential to also talk about the need for sustainable environments, affordable housing for these communities, green jobs. I think it also goes down to how do we make sure that every work that women and girls are involved in, indigenous communities are involved in, bringing and has an economic component to it, and how do we even have a just transition at the end of the day. I'll maybe also ask the people in the forum to keep on sharing and sharing what they're doing under the ecosystem restoration, what experiences they're having, and how we can get involved more in climate action as well. So I would also like try to ask one more question to Amy or Leticia. How do you think young people can get involved in climate action and mobilize other young people? Leticia, do you want to go first?
Sure, no problem. Well, I think that what I'm about to say applies not only to young people, but maybe also women and other vulnerable groups. And it's something that we came to our attention at LRI by when we did a gender analysis on which we based our gender component and policy. And we did this gender analysis to understand the needs and restrictions that are faced by women in the forestry sector. And what was highlighted to us is the need for organizations like ours to make sure that women, young people, vulnerable groups have access to the opportunities that are being created or provided for them. And we realized that while we were, for example, announcing the opportunities in our ecosystem restoration work in municipalities for the local community to be engaged, women, for example, weren't receiving these calls because municipalities in Lebanon are mostly male-dominated areas. So I would say that making sure that your target group actually has access to the opportunity or has knowledge of the opportunity in their specific areas is really important. And so what we did to address that is we ended up adjusting our approach by having female focal points in each towns, which also brings me to the point of saying that representation, I think, is also really important. If you have, our team at LRI is mostly female dominated, and we're all very young and very energetic, and I think that has been sort of encouraging for other women in very traditional areas to work with us. But also the female focal points that we have chosen in each of these towns have been really energetic and motivated, and by choosing them and placing them in this position or asking them to work with us in the towns that we engage in, they have become sort of champions for female participation in the area, and they have created groups through which they have actively sought out other women and encouraged them to work with us as well. And what we would do with these champions, or with the help of these powerful women or local representatives, is we would give them a role of responsibility that is not typically given to women in the forestry field, such as in Lebanon, of course, such as being a site supervisor. And that would also encourage their participation and the participation of other women and young individuals in our activities. And this has been a very successful experience for us. So representation and access to opportunity.
That's incredible, Latisha. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I think the first thing is that you don't feel like, I really want to tell young folks that you don't have to know everything about climate change. Your knowledge of your own experiences are more than enough to know that there is a climate crisis in the first place on our earth, and that our earth needs everyone and each one of us to make a difference. And second, kind of speaking about what Latisha has done, second, I want to address that we need to give younger generations credit. They know what is happening to their cities and to them, and some might not have the words for those experiences, like I haven't had them, but teaching them is so important, and watch them make a difference and crave change for themselves and for their community. FACJ has done this through various workshops. I literally just got off the call to give a workshop for the Bronx Academy. And I think that teaching kids about what veganism is, what plant-based lifestyle is, what environmental justice is, and how it affects their own communities gives them the language and gives them the experiences, right, to put them in words. And I think like that's so important. And third, being involved in the process has to begin on the ground to create change. So join FACJ, open your chapter if it doesn't exist, partner with an organization that are doing similar work if you don't want to lead the mission. All goals are linked and important to achieve. All of our mission is for a larger picture, something that was bigger than, this was something that was bigger than me. And I didn't even know that I was starting a whole food justice movement just from my own backyard. So don't cut yourself short when thinking about creating or joining something new. And lastly, I believe that getting involved with local elections is so important. Learning about who's making these decisions in your neighborhood, how long have they been in office, what have they been doing to create local change. We are currently in the movement that is intergenerational, and everyone can be a part of the climate justice movement. For me, it was the women like Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, my assemblywoman, AOC, my congresswoman of my district, and Tiffany Caban, who's currently running for city council, who have inspired me to continue advocating for climate and environmental justice work in my community, along with other grassroots organizations.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think we share so much in this perspective. I feel one thing for sure is climate change is here and it's happening and it's intensifying over time. And it is the children and us young people of today who are facing or will face the worst impacts of climate change. So I feel we can get involved in various ways. One could be also through demanding our governments for inclusive policies. And I know most times we are brought on board in these policy making spaces or tables as passive victims, but we need to engage our government more using our working approaches. If I feel like here in Uganda, I think under Girls for Climate, we've been pushing for inclusive policies, and it's not been very easy. For example, we kind of push and go to different offices, go to different spaces, and just make sure you're being heard. However, most of the times I feel we are left behind because they think we don't know what we are doing. I kind of feel that every other time I get into people's offices, they feel like we are not being serious. So I feel we are supposed to be taken serious, and we can only do this if we keep on doing what we do and keep on pushing for what we are pushing and also prove ourselves. So if there is no seat at the table, I always say, or I always actually create a seat for myself. We are a global village, but our local climate challenges most times are different and the context is really different. So I wouldn't say that there's a solution that really, there's a one size that fits all. I feel every country or every community has gotten local climate challenges. Of course, these are leading to a global impact. But also when you're getting solutions, I feel making solutions context specific would make sense to us. You could just, for example, here at Girls for Climate, we engage communities themselves into the different works that they do through our demonstration hubs. So we have climate demonstration hubs where young women and girls come to think of solutions to their local challenges, solutions to the different things that are happening in their community. So we don't bring this to them, we kind of just incite or provoke the action within them. So these demonstration hubs have actually helped over time, and we feel like we want to even expand more to different communities so that they don't wait for Girls for Climate to come to their community to help them solve a challenge, but they stand up for themselves and fight a certain challenge that they are facing as a community. So I feel we need to make the fight and very specific and rally behind certain campaigns until governments hear out and engage us in decision-making processes. Just like Leticia said, I feel representation is a key thing, but also representation when you know what you're doing is even better. So if young people maybe in a certain community, young people in Uganda or young people in the US or Lebanon just rally together towards a certain campaign, I feel the voice is even much stronger, right? So if someone is representing, they have what to talk about. Yes, so that we don't have so much going on and also demanding for so much like they normally say. So I feel over time we've learned as Girls for Climate to rally behind something and then push for it until it's done. I feel like we have the knowledge and expertise to create working solutions and boost the green jobs like Leticia and Amy have been talking about, and heavily contribute to the green economies. And this can be done in different sectors, could be energy sector, urban sustainability, among others. And we can tap into this to speak up for climate action with real actions, because we need to be, I feel, as we are talking, also need to be really very visionary as we keep on bringing practical solutions I feel we need to be very, very visionary as we are pushing for the agenda. We've also seen private companies highly contributing to emissions and making our planet unhealthy. These are like banks funding the fossil fuel industries. Right now in Uganda and East Africa, there's the crude oil pipeline that is going to run through Tanzania and Uganda. And this is going to be the hottest pipeline. But as campaigners and activists are trying to say, this is going to affect the local communities, banks have continued to fund it, and governments have continued to really pave way for, ask for more loans and see that this is funded. But as activists, I feel we need to kind of also vote with our money. If the one voice petitions and all is not working, I feel we could also try to push through voting with our money. For example, if how can we bank in eco-friendly banks that are not funding these fossil fuel industries? I know as young people, we are launching various campaigns on social media, signing petitions and calling out these companies and industries, but we can't have a one-sided fight. I feel let's keep voting them out with our money, because the consumers highly influence the supply. What do I mean here? We need to buy from companies that are eco-friendly. If one day we all boycott Coca-Cola because of the plastic bottles, and I feel chances are very high that they will rethink their approach into an eco-friendly one. Same could apply to all other companies. But this can only happen if our local communities are aware of the dangers of this. I know we are already creating awareness and educating our local communities, and really education really works. But also let us continue to do so. Let us do it in different spaces. I think when we push it out there for people to kind of know the impacts of a certain company, industry, or different works that are going on in their community, the voice is even stronger. I feel with this collective action, we can achieve climate justice at the end of the day. I'll end here on this, and maybe if Amy or Leticia still have something to add on mobilizing young people and influencing change, you could also go on there.
Juanita, thank you for that. I just want to second what you said, that it's all very context dependent. There isn't a one size fits all, like you said, exactly. And I think we see it even here in my tiny country, from village to village, but also from, the urban context to the rural context. And so is really very context dependent on how you can reach out to young people and motivate them, and also in terms of what type of climate action or climate justice actions that you can get them to engage in. But what's so amazing, and I'm realizing also from what both of you have been saying, is that the motivation is there, and young people want to do something, and they realize that their future is at risk, and that this is a very serious issue that we are dealing with. And so, like you said, exactly, Juanita, it's creating the seat at the table for them. And I think that that is something that all of our organizations, I mean, the 3 organizations that are here are actually doing. So that's really amazing. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that. Let's keep the discussion going on also in the platform. You can share with us how new ways that we can still push for climate action and mobilize more young people to join us in the fight for climate justice and climate action at the end of the day. So just keep on sharing the best practices that are working in your different communities. Maybe we can borrow on that and see how we can also implement it in our different communities and our different contexts. So in the public conversation platform, Amy, there's a question: how can women and girls be part of climate justice when they're also struggling to maintain or improving their livelihoods? I'm really interested to hear this, Amy.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think the first thing is recognizing your own eco-anxiety and eco-grief, knowing that those things are valid. These terms aren't something that I didn't have until recently. I actually learned it through Instagram, and it really validated my experiences. And I hope that people know that they're not alone in those kinds of struggles. I also believe that activism isn't really a choice, it's a necessity, and it comes from a need, right? And voices are needed, like your voices are needed from your experiences, because those are also really valid. I think the last thing is also just reaching in into your own community and seeing how you can create a system of care and accountability. I think oftentimes that we have seen this in Veggie is where we have created community fridges for people that, you know, lost their jobs during the pandemic and couldn't afford food. And we created 3 community fridges for people and also do weekly drop-ins of foods. We have created community gardens in our fridges in Denver and Philadelphia. We have community fridges and we give people free food produce or teach them how to do home gardening for food production. I think we have to rely on each other and communicate what is needed, which also includes boundaries, right? Like we can't always talk about climate justice, especially when it affects us so much on a daily basis, some more than others. So knowing your limits and knowing your boundaries, but also don't fear reaching in and knowing what your community needs.
Thank you so much, Amy, on that. Latisha, you want to go?
Can I just slightly add to that? Thank you, Amy. I loved what you said. I think also, I don't know if you know, but here in Lebanon, we're witnessing a historic economic crisis that is really just a huge burden on a lot of individuals in the country and a lot of families who are struggling financially and their livelihoods are really being affected. So this question is something that even, you know, I think about living in these difficult, you know, situations in Lebanon, like how can we be working on climate justice or working on all these climate actions when we have so much to deal with already here in terms of our economy and, you know, the explosion and everything. But I think it's important to recognize that working on climate justice and working on climate action is also a pathway towards better livelihoods and a pathway towards economic recovery in a way that is healthy for our populations. And also, I think that it's important also to understand, as Amy was saying, that it's okay if you can't do it all, and it's okay if the burden is carried for the moment by those who can. It's not exactly an equal balance of who should be participating.
100%. I think the restoration part, Leticia, of what you said is super important because, you know, we believe that land is a resource and it restores like what we have lost through slavery, farmland injustices, climate and environmental injustices, and even through migration, right? There has been moments where in Veggie we have seen people come to the gardens and interact and say, hey, I used to like grow peppers here. I didn't even know we had a community garden here. So I think in like micro ways, there's so many ways that you can volunteer and help out for your own community to help in climate justice framework kind of work.
Yeah, I think also just to add on that, I feel this is a question that most of the communities actually ask us. You kind of get them to do something and you are influencing them to a certain cause. By the end of the day, they're asking you how they are benefiting from it. Of course, you do the education on the impact of climate change and all, but also here I feel the problem, the fact that climate change is not so vivid in people's eyes, it kind of just gets very hard to convince them to join the movement or to join different actions, because for them, the reality is they are just poor, right? They don't have money, they don't have food. Why would they go for something like climate justice and fight for it from Monday to Monday without, you know, getting something out of it because they have the livelihood to maintain or improve? So what we do here is we do, I think also Leticia shared on that, doing different activities, for example, things that bring out the green jobs so that they can get involved. So as activists, as people that are leading campaigns, as campaigners, and leading movements, we also need to have the aspect of, as a young person, I'm doing this. But at the end of the day, I have, you know, I need to live, you know, I need to improve my livelihood. I need to improve my well-being. So we also need to think more on how can I make green things out of everything and see that I get maybe an income out of it at the end of the day. Because we really also, the reality is we need to live, right? So I feel as you're also leading movements, we need also to bring in different aspects that can improve on our livelihoods as well. Here, I would say some of the things we tell women to do are they make things out of plastics that are sold at the end of the day. But we know as a movement, we are reducing the plastics in the ground, right? And also they are getting some income out of it. So as they are making these things, they are really passionate about it. They know they are reducing the plastics, but at the end of the day, they're also earning something out of it. So they see this as not only waste, but also wealth to them. So I feel just having a component, this kind of component will actually pull many people to the cause. I'm talking depending on the context in Uganda. So yeah, so here we kind of just make sure we kind of attach an economic component to the different actions. When it comes to ecosystem restoration, so we give out fruit trees to different farmers. And these fruit trees, at the end of the day, they're beating food insecurity, but at the end of the day, they're also selling the fruits that come out of the trees to maintain their livelihood. So I feel we also need to think further outside the box, easier for people that you are calling on to join us for the fight for climate justice, I would say, just to add on what Leticia and Amy have said. Yes, so I would, maybe if there is no any other submission, Amy or Leticia, I would also move on to another question from one of the participants, that is, what national policies, strategies, and plans countries have implemented inspire you, and what still needs to be done in this regard? So, Latisha, if you want to just go ahead to talk about the national policies.
Thank you, Juanita. So on a personal level, I am really inspired by the Green New Deal, which is a proposal plan that unfortunately I don't think passed the US Senate in 2019, but that in various forms is nowadays witnessing increasing support worldwide, especially after the COVID pandemic. I really admire how inclusive it aims to be, how it takes into consideration healthcare, education, minimum wages, affordable housing. It really shows how intersectional the climate crisis is. In addition, it's a plan that includes all of these aspects in addition to all of the commitments that are needed to mitigate the impacts of climate change at an energy, carbon, and infrastructure level. I also really like how ambitious it is, which is what I believe is really needed in face of this horrible climate crisis that we're living. But in terms of what is needed still, or I would say local assessments to try to better understand the impact of climate policies, whether they are nationwide or in global protocols on local populations. So our work at LRI has really exhibited how necessary these assessments are. You would have this big concept, for example, of gender inclusion that is a worldwide highlighted necessity. You would see articles and reports that explain how women and vulnerable groups are affected disproportionately by climate change. But then you would go to the local context, which in Lebanon is a very, very small local community, and it would be difficult to see the direct linkages, which are undoubtedly there, just very varied in different local contexts, which is sort of going back to the whole how it's different in different contexts, like you were saying, Juanita. So, I mean, even in my tiny country, the impact of climate change on communities and in different sectors within a single community differs greatly. And so I would say what is needed is community-based inclusive assessment studies, data that, like, for example, the gender analysis that we did at LRI, that would help provide more concrete policy guidance and implementation.
Nice. Amy, do you have some policies that are really cool for you and you feel they really inspire you?
Yes. So also, Leticia, thank you for uplifting the new Green Deal. I think it's so important. And going towards that, there's two things currently that are going on in Queens. So right now in Astoria, organizers are trying to block a power plant from using fracked natural gas. And actually, Astoria is also nicknamed even Asthma Alley because the asthma is higher than average in Astoria, where I grew up, and there's a lot of health disparities because of climate injustices and environmental justices. So we're trying to pass that as of right now, and there has been so many organizations that have been trying so hard to let people aware of this issue that is happening in their backyards. And also currently in Queens, we need to pass the Climate and Community Investment Act, which was actually brought on by my mentor, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, which would charge polluters for harming our communities in order to fund green jobs and infrastructure, direct finance assistance, job training, and community organizations, again, like Vajimihas. So it's really just really great that these people in our communities have been advocating for this, especially when there was a period where I didn't even know the politicians in Queens, because that's how long they have been in office for and haven't done anything about it. And that's how long that there has been white folks in positions that don't even live in Queens to talk about these issues. So I'm just grateful for all the organizers, including ourselves, that get to speak about these policy work.
Nice. I feel when it comes to Uganda, we have so many nice policies, to be honest, like really nice policies on paper. If you could just read everything, you would feel like, oh, wow, if you kind of just have this implemented, it would really be in a very changed country. We have so many policies. But for me, I would say Uganda is having a national climate change policy where all decisions are made in regard to climate change using this particular policy. Of course, we are in the process of creating the adaptation plan, because the adaptation plan is also important to Uganda. But for me, the national climate change policy is really very nicely written, to be honest. But when you go into it and feel like the implementation is really lacking. I would say policies are nice, they inspire me, but implementation doesn't inspire me for sure. So the policies are really good. And we have also, Uganda is revising the nationally determined contributions. Currently, young people have been consulted on this particular document to be revised. And what is sad is that the youth consultations are being done by people who are not young people. So we're trying to change this to know, if you're trying to revise this, how can we engage young people at the top in the entire process of revising this document? So these are some of the policies that are really nice. I was going through the national climate change policy for Uganda, and what is sad is that young people are not mentioned anywhere. It is sad, right? So they are only mentioned where they're showing the vulnerability. Young people, women, children are considered vulnerable groups of people. We all know that. But what is lacking is how we're involving the vulnerable groups of people into policy implementation, right? So the policies look nice. They really inspire me, but implementation is still very lacking. And I think this is something that is cutting across. We have very nice policies, but implementation is really hard. Yeah. So those are some of the policies that inspire me, and some of the policies I would talk for in case I was given an opportunity to kind of just go in there and share the views, the experiences that young people face. So I feel this is something that we all need to get involved in. People are making policies behind doors and we don't know what's going on. They're just considering us vulnerable groups of people, yes. But what happens after that? How can we bring our solutions to, this policy implementation process as well? Yes, so I would say we are a few minutes to the top of the hour, and I would ask Leticia and Amy to kind of, if you have any closing remarks or anything that we want to talk about before we close it up.
Leticia, do you want to go first?
I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. It has really been so inspiring, so informative. It's been so amazing to learn about both of your organizations, your initiatives, and I look forward to doing this again someday. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Juanita. Thank you, Leticia, for speaking. And y'all can, you can follow me on Amy Keichis on Instagram, check out vegiemijas.com, and, join local organizations and continue fighting for climate justice in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy and Latisha, for being here as an amazing panelists, and also honored to be part of this panel discussion. I'll just roll through a few points on how we can take action as everyone listening in right now. Let's continue spreading the word about climate action in all ways you feel your community will identify with. It can be in schools, it can be in hospitals, on a train, in a taxi, gathering among others, because climate education is very, very important, just like our panelists have highlighted during this discussion, but also having a collective action. Amy is creating a movement. How can we join different movements to see that our voices are heard? We need to act now, and the time is running out. Keep doing, engaging, and influencing in climate action. Remember, our local actions will lead to a global impact. Also, get involved in the Feminist Action for Climate Justice work, and of course, the Generation Equality Forum platform. This space is amazing for the general public to engage in dialogues for advancing goals of the generation equality. So feel free also to always engage in the discussions there. We'd like to also close it here and thank you all for joining in for this discussion. Just do one action for the World Environment Day. Could be just deciding to always carry your own bottle everywhere you go, so that you ditch plastic, you can plant a tree, and do whatever you need to do to have a healthy planet. Thank you all. Stay safe and have a good day, good evening, and good night.
Thank you. Bye, Leticia. Bye, Juanita.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.